beyond nuclear ballistic missiles, advanced tactical missile system or ATACMS, Storm Shadow missiles. These are a few weapons which have now entered the battlefield in the Russia-Ukraine war. And stakes are rising in a war that has been going on for over 1,000 days. And there is a looming threat of the war spilling over. US President Joe Biden is doing all he can to help Ukraine before he leaves the White House. And then you have NATO countries preparing for what would come if the war spills over. So at this point, it becomes crucial to ask, what turn would the conflict take with developments happening so rapidly on the battlefield? So I have an expert with me to help us understand, Glen Grant. He's a defense expert and somebody who's been closely tracking the Russia-Ukraine war. He's joining us from Riga. Thank you, Glen, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much, and good morning.
Good morning. So my first question to you is, Russia fired a hypersonic intermediate range ballistic missile at the Ukraine in the city of Dnipro, and Russian president has clearly said that this is a warning to the West. So how do you see this development? How big is this?
I think it's less big than people realize.
Okay.
I mean, if you take, first of all, on the Ukrainian side, there is nothing unusual about this for the Ukrainians, because if you're fighting for your life, then you expect the other side to use all the weapons that they've got. And I think a large amount of Ukrainians genuinely expect that Putin might one day fire a nuclear weapon, but that's not going to change anything on that side. But for the West, I mean, there was a lot of panic yesterday. You could actually see that in the press and in the news. And I was interviewed 3 times yesterday, and they were all panicky type questions about, what does this mean? Is it going to change? I think Putin is using this to send a warning. I mean, he didn't use it to destroy anything, because it was actually although it's a very powerful missile, it was an extremely weak warhead. So it is only a warning. But this war is going to continue as it's going. I mean, the main thing is Putin believes he's winning. Yeah, people have to understand that, because what he's doing to NATO, what he's doing to the European Union in terms of churning it up with Hungary and other leaders who are sort of working towards Putin's ambitions. So the last thing that Putin wants to do is to break his progress by firing something like a nuclear weapon, which would then turn many countries that are at the moment half pro towards him, you could say even India, into people who are going to say, no, this is not acceptable. So he's just going to want to keep playing the way that he's playing at the moment, because his forces are moving forward in the east of Ukraine, and he doesn't want to spoil that.
You rightly mentioned that it's a lot about optics and symbolic gesturing of anger. But sir, you mentioned that it's a weak warhead. And I think this weapon that Russia used has, of course, created a lot of buzz. So could you go ahead and explain to us what this weapon means, and how is it actually a weak warhead?
Well, it's this particular rocket, if you want to call it that, basically has 6 small rockets inside it. So it would be, if it was nuclear, you'd be looking at 6 small nuclear weapons which come down and attack. But because there's no nuclear warhead in it, they basically just put about 30 kilograms of explosive in each one, which is actually far, far, far less than the weapons that they've been using, the old heavy bombs that they've been using on the front line and against buildings. So it really was just public relations for both internally for Putin's team, and externally to create the buzz and hype that we've got at the moment.
Exactly. And sir, as you mentioned about the panic in West, we have seen a lot of reports coming up where it was mentioned that Berlin has begun planning for the deployment of up to 800,000 NATO troops, and this includes Americans as well, if tensions with Russia escalate. And we'd also seen reports of how Berlin is planning to move about 200,000 military vehicles across the German soil if it's needed. And at the same time, we also saw Nordic countries, including Norway, Sweden and Denmark, issuing war advisories to their citizens. So how much of a risk there is, you think, of this war spilling over?
None at the moment. Not in a military fighting sense. What Putin is doing is across Europe is actually trying to unsettle people, because his aim, of course, is to change the politics.
And you think he's been successful with that?
Well, I think he is in some countries, yes. Yeah. Well, you could say definitely yes in Britain, because he managed to get Brexit. Yeah. He failed in Spain with his attempts to get half the country to break away from the centre. But look at Hungary. Look at he's got a Russian-leaning president in Bulgaria, yeah. A Russian-leaning president in Slovakia. So in that respect, in the politics, he's doing quite well, because I mean Hungary has been delaying support and aid to Ukraine, both inside NATO and inside the European Union, and that's a big success for him. Yeah. So as long as what he's after is this change between a rule-based world where we follow the law and we have respect for each other, to a power-based world where he can do what he likes, and he's working towards that. So you have to judge everything by that. And he's moving quite well, in his opinion, I believe. So he's not going to want to upset that.
All right. And, we have been seeing tensions escalate. Russia formally revised its nuclear strike doctrine, which essentially means that it could now deploy nuclear weapons to counter non-nuclear conventional weapon attacks as well. So again, how real is this threat of a nuclear attack, or is it again,
right, this is wonderful. This is wonderful, because you have to remember that Eastern Europe and Russia, that pieces of paper are meaningless. They are, to use the expression of one of my Bulgarian friends, they are pieces of wondrousness. And so you write papers not to be used, but to show how good you are. So Putin has changed the doctrine on paper, firstly to show his own public that he is still the master, he's the man, he's on top, we're threatening them, and everything else. Yeah. And that's quite successful. People believe it. And then on the other side, this paper of wondrousness is designed to make people in the West worry that they've changed the doctrine. Well, there's no change to the doctrine. Putin is a power-based leader. Yeah. The doctrine doesn't matter. The papers don't matter. It's what he decides that matters. So the paper itself is a public relations exercise to do what those two things that I just said. Show his own side how great he is, show the enemy that he's doing something serious and they should worry. And he was highly successful in both of them. But he hasn't changed. His views on what he's going to do and how he's going to do it are the same today, yesterday, and 2 years ago.
I think that's a very interesting interpretation of that development. And I want to come to the West. We have been talking about Russia, but we also saw that US very recently allowed Ukraine to use its long-range missiles deep inside the Russian territory. So how do you read this development? Because why now?
Right. Well, the first thing is Biden is not doing all he can to support Ukraine, because there are a huge amount of more things that he could do. Let's be blunt. He supported Israel, 5-10 times harder than he's done for Ukraine, including, American aircraft flying in support of Israel. Well, he hasn't done that for Ukraine. And I will point out that several journalists have said, yes, but we have a treaty with Israel. Well, America had a treaty with Ukraine called the Budapest Memorandum, where they promised to protect the sovereignty and integrity of Ukraine, and that hasn't happened. So Biden could have done a lot more. I think that what Biden is doing at the moment is a cynical attempt to show at the end of his time what a good man he was, because he's actually been getting a very hard time, even from his own Democrats, about the lack of support, and especially about not allowing Zelensky to use weapons that they've been given, because those weapons are actually there, but not to use them properly against Russia. So Russia has had impunity about where it puts its logistics and headquarters, and it's put them really close to the front line. Okay. And Ukraine hasn't been able to hit them. So that's my take on this. I know there are people who disagree with my view on Biden, but I'm sorry. As a military person, I look at results. I don't look at words.
Okay, now coming to sir, this nexus forming between Russia and North Korea. We have seen that North Korea has sent its troops to Russia to fight against Ukraine. We have seen that Korea has been supplying arms to Russia. So how do you see this nexus forming against NATO?
That's a very good question. I don't think it's forming against NATO. I think you have to say that it's forming against the West.
Yes, correct.
Rather than NATO. And by West, I also mean, Korea, Taiwan, Australia, New Zealand. Basically, it's a nexus forming against the democratic world.
Yeah.
Because whilst there's democracy, there's rules-based order.
Yes.
And therefore, this group of at the moment 4, then you can add Venezuela and a couple of other countries. They don't want democracy at all, and they don't want a rules-based order because it stops them making money. It stops the greed of these organizations and the power of these organizations. How do I see it? Well, next? Well, I don't see it stopping. I think that's the first thing. And I think also that, you can't separate now Russia from Iran, from North Korea,
and also from China. We had seen that all four of these countries also forming some sort of alliance.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that it's a very dangerous alliance for all of us.
Exactly, especially for global security. If we talk about this.
Yes, I completely agree, and I think that this is why it's so important that America is seen to be strong and powerful in defense of rules-based order. Because if they start slipping back, which they have been under Biden, of showing weakness and not showing strength when it was needed, then we no longer have, you could call it, the world's policeman. Now, I know that there are a lot of people who hate America for its role as having been a world's policeman, and there's a lot of hate comes out of India as well for this. But let's be blunt. If we don't have a policeman for the world for rules-based order, then there is no rules-based order, and what happens afterwards is just corruption flourishes, theft flourishes, power flourishes, and there is no sense and safety in the world security system at all.
True. All right, so my last question to you is, winters are approaching. Russia has been attacking a lot of infrastructure and power grids in Ukraine. And so how do you see this war playing out with all the tensions rising?
Well, again, I go back to that first bit. The tensions are not rising inside Ukraine.
Yeah.
People are only getting what they expect what's coming, and that is normal. I think. Yeah, I was called a fool for this yesterday in an interview, but I think that the only way that this is going to break down is if the Russian economy actually collapses. Now, people have said to me it's not actually going downhill. Well, it's not.
Exactly, it's not.
It's not yet. No, half and half. There are a lot of things that are going downhill.
Okay.
For example, that a lot of the companies that exist, that even companies that are producing defense materials are now unable to find labor to actually to expand the work that they're asked to expand, and also on 21% interest rates, it becomes almost impossible to borrow money for many companies. They just know they can't pay it back. And then the third thing is America is going to keep tightening the sanctions to stop Russia getting the bits that they want. And there was a piece on the media today just saying that most of the Russian aircraft, civil aircraft, are now grounded because they just can't maintain them and can't get the parts. Well, things like that are steps, and they are serious steps.
So how long do you think that will take, given that the war has been going on?
Maybe a year and a half, 2 years before we see a full fracture. Russia has to be ostracized completely by everybody in every democratic country to try and actually to get them to break so that they're forced to actually to stop the war. Until then, I think they'll just keep killing their own people, throwing all the weapons that they've got at Ukraine, and trying to bully the West into letting them keep the Donbass. What Trump is going to do, I have no idea at all. And I don't
Exactly.
think
My
anybody else
last question to you was this, that, when Trump comes into the White House, how do you see this then happening?
Well, I mean, I think it's going to be interesting. I mean, one thing is that is quite clear to me from time is that he really doesn't have ideas himself. He has general thoughts of something, that this is a good thing, that's a bad thing, but the ideas have got to come from his team. And obviously the actual work has got to come from his team. And the question is what's the quality of his team? Because if they're low quality, then we're going to see low quality government, and low quality government is not going to be very clever at following through with things that he might decide he wants to do.
Because he's already made claims saying that he's going to stop the war very quickly.
Yeah. But it's nonsense, isn't it? This is public relations. Come on, he can't do that. Putin will just keep going. Why should Putin listen to him? Because Trump has very few tools.
Unless he comes in with an agreement that actually benefits Russia at this point.
Yeah, unless he comes in with something. Yes, but then Ukraine hasn't got to follow that, and Ukraine may not follow that. And Europe may not follow that, because a lot of people in Europe understand full well that if Russia takes itself up to the border of Poland and the border of the Baltics and the border of anywhere else, that NATO countries and even non-NATO countries are in trouble. Sure. So even if America closes down on this and doesn't help Ukraine, that Europe will have to step up and do things. And I think that there is much more discussion in Europe now about what can we do, what might we have to do.
That is true. NATO has definitely become more active ever since Trump got elected.
Yes, it has. Well, since Trump's first period in office, when he threatened them, and rightly so, because some of the countries were freeloading.
Yeah.
And I think that message has got across now. And there is considerably less freeloading than there was before. The trouble is the danger now is that they get extra money and they spend it on historic things, not on the war as it is really now and as it is changing, which requires different weapons and different systems.
Okay. And so do you see that improving anytime, sir?
No, I think that countries have almost got to go to war first before they actually realise that a lot of the things they've got are not going to work in the future, and that they've got to change.
All right. So basically, we're not looking for any end to this war anytime soon. What you're saying? No,
I don't think so.
Well,
I'd be very surprised if it suddenly...
That's not a very optimistic note we're going to conclude this chat at. But thank you so much, sir, for putting this whole ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine into perspective for us. Thank you.
Not at all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, viewers, for joining us. And stay tuned to India Today Global, where we simplify geopolitics for you.